Good afternoon. Welcome to the News Roundup for Friday, September 12, 2025. It's Bill Thomas here with a number of urgent stories to share with you today. And here's what's happening right now on the big Roundup. We begin with this. New details emerging regarding the 22-year-old suspect arrested in the fatal shooting of political activist Charlie Kirk. President Trump ratcheting up his effort to use our country's military to battle domestic crime by sending the National Guard to yet another American city. And the Senate's top Democrat now warning that his party is willing to risk a total government shutdown if Republicans don't give in to their demands concerning health care. Also, a new NATO operation has the allies making bold moves along their entire eastern front, and a story about a Pennsylvania man and his very unique emotional support pet. All this and more coming up right now on the Big Roundup. We have a great deal to get to today, and we begin with breaking details which are just now emerging with regard to the capture and the arrest of a suspect in the cold-blooded assassination of political activist Charlie Kirk. Officials now identifying the alleged killer as 22-year-old Tyler Robinson of St. George, Utah, which is about a 4-hour drive away from Utah Valley University. That's where the murder took place on Wednesday afternoon. According to law enforcement, Robinson's father recognized him as the suspect from the images which were released by authorities before encouraging his son to turn himself in. And then after some hesitation, the suspect ultimately agreeing with the family, then contacting their local youth pastor, who's also a U.S. Marshal, to kind of streamline the process. Utah Governor Spencer Cox says that according to family members, the suspect had become much more political in recent years, and that just last night, a family friend had contacted law enforcement to tell them that Robinson had basically confessed by implying to them that he was in fact responsible for the crime. He also says that Robinson has already been booked into jail on suspicion of aggravated murder, also felony discharge of a firearm and obstruction of justice, and that formal charges are expected to be filed when the alleged shooter appears in court, and that'll be early next week. Before he was arrested, Robinson was attending a technical college in southern Utah where he was studying to become an electrician. Additionally, he has no prior criminal record, and his father is now a retired law enforcement officer and, coincidentally, a registered Republican. Some of the incriminating evidence against Robinson that's already been collected include the bolt-action .30-06 rifle, which was allegedly used to commit the crime. That weapon found wrapped in a towel in a bush near a building where the shooting took place. In the meantime, the FBI continues to gather mounting evidence against the suspect, with Director Kash Patel saying that over 11,000 leads have already been called into his agency. During a sit-down TV interview, President Trump became the first person to reveal that a suspect was in custody, and he's now calling for the suspect to receive the death penalty if he is convicted. Final thoughts. This is the News Roundup Lowdown. You know, there's very little we can tell you today about Charlie Kirk that you don't already know. And Charlie was a great guy. He was young, talented, spiritual, committed to friends, family, and even perfect strangers. He was adored by millions, admired by the President of the United States, and by all accounts, a very accomplished businessman as well. Tragically, Kirk's life was cut short at the hands of not a man, but a coward who went to a Charlie Kirk rally at a university campus. He climbed up to the roof of a building on that campus, and he took his shot. Today, Charlie Kirk is in fact gone, but his mission will not be stopped. Turning Point USA, the nonprofit organization which he founded in 2012, it's right now stronger than ever. And to help celebrate his life, I'd encourage you to do what I did. Check out the website. I've been there a number of times. It's tpusa.com. You know, more than anyone, Charlie believed in the power of argument and good faith debate to find the truth and guide people towards, if not agreement, then at least some kind of a mutual understanding. He always did that very respectfully. Charlie said that above all, he wished to be remembered for his faith. Far more than any political victory, Charlie wanted to see a spiritual revival among America's youth. A life well lived, Charlie Kirk, and mission accomplished. With that, we welcome back to the program producer Davey. And Davey, what a difference a day makes. A murder suspect rapidly taken into custody. A testament, I think, to brilliant law enforcement, a brilliant law enforcement system, as well as a caring public who provided thousands and thousands of tips during that massive suspect search. And you were watching as closely as I was, right?
Oh, absolutely. I was following it very closely, as most of our nation was.
Yeah. Okay, so your thoughts and your comments, absolutely always encouraged. You'll catch us via email at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. And Davey, I know the email bag is overflowing. Folks have a lot to say about this one. And who do we turn to first?
Okay, Bill, we start out with Wayne in Mount Pleasant, Michigan.
Welcome to the program, Wayne.
And Wayne says very succinctly, I hope they give him the chair.
Well, you can't say that you hope they give him the chair because he's a suspect right now. He hasn't been tried by a jury of his peers. He hasn't been convicted of anything. By and large, most people agree they've got the guy they want, but we have to go through the process. So be fair and be patient. And Davey, who's up next?
Okay, Bill, here's one from Lydia in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Hello, Lydia.
And she says, my thoughts and prayers go out to everyone who's been touched by the loss of Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
He left us too soon, but his legacy will live on forever.
It will, and it'll do that through his website, tpusa.com, the one we were just talking about, Turning Point. You know, it's also utterly amazing that anybody in 2025 thinks they can murder someone in broad daylight and somehow get away with it. You know, the whole world, Dave, I'm sure you'd agree, the whole world is camered up. There's always somebody somewhere watching. Also, law enforcement, it's a science. And it was just a matter of time before a suspect was behind bars. And to reiterate, we kind of said this a moment ago, you got to be fair. This guy is a suspect. He hasn't been tried yet. He hasn't been convicted of a crime. We think it's the guy, but he's not been convicted yet. So please be patient. Don't pass judgment just yet. All right, moving along, we'll change things up just a bit now, turning our focus to President Trump's expanding use of the U.S. military to save our nation's cities from the scourge of rampant, violent crime, which is threatening to tear our country apart. The president saying that he now plans to deploy the National Guard to Memphis, Tennessee, in his next step to safeguard our country and make America great again. Trump says that the city's Democratic mayor and the state's Republican governor are both very happy with his decision to provide federal crime-fighting assistance to the deeply troubled southern town. He also says he's making the move after a recent meeting with a prominent railroad CEO who desperately pleaded with him to do something about the city's out-of-control crime. In the meantime, Tennessee Governor Bill Lee says he's planning to work hand-in-hand with our nation's commander-in-chief to figure out how to best coordinate all the agencies which will be involved with the sweeping law enforcement mission. This is going to be very complicated, but it is necessary. Some of the organizations involved include the FBI, the Memphis Police Department, and the Tennessee State Patrol. Also says that local and state law enforcement already working with the feds and making hundreds of arrests of violent criminal offenders, and that nothing is off the table when it comes to fighting crime in Tennessee. Trump says that he's considering sending the National Guard to New Orleans as well, and that he'd rather be sending troops to deal with the runaway crime in Chicago. However, local officials in the Windy City, they remain fiercely opposed to the president's plan, and Trump says that right now the city is overrun with professional agitators who are far too hostile. Final thought, this is the News Roundup Lowdown. You know, Memphis, like Washington, D.C., L.A., New York, Chicago, and a number of other big cities across the country, they're in big trouble right now. Yeah, crime is rampant. They need help, and in the interest of public safety, the big fix will come from the Trump administration. Now, the difference between Memphis and Los Angeles is that L.A. Mayor Karen Bass and California's Governor Gavin Newsom did all they could to battle the Trump administration when guard troops were sent to the Golden State just a few months ago to rescue the city. The mayor of Memphis and Tennessee's governor, on the other hand, they realize full well that community safety trumps politics. You get that, Davey? It trumps politics. Did you catch that?
Yeah, well done, Bill.
Pretty clever, huh? Yeah, Trump's politics, and in the interest of restoring law and order to the great city of Memphis, National Guard personnel will be welcomed, and I guarantee it, with open arms. You're going to see it on the big screen in no time at all. Now, in an effort to take back the streets, Guard members, they're going to work in concert with federal and local officials, and in my estimation, Memphis will get the same treatment afforded to Washington and Los Angeles, a reduction in a wide variety of crimes, safer streets and neighborhoods, community pride, and an overall improved way of life. It's all pretty basic. Now, share your thoughts and comments and ideas with us. We're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. I can't imagine anybody going against this idea, Davey, but we'll go to the email bag and check out what folks are saying. What do you got?
Okay. Here's one from Hank in Wheeling, West Virginia.
What are you thinking, Hank?
He says, Memphis doesn't need a few National Guard troops. It needs an entire battalion. I suggest adding Philadelphia and Detroit to the list, too.
Yeah, and I had no idea. I don't have many friends or associates in that part of the country. But, Davey, maybe you know more than I do. Is Memphis really that bad?
Well, I've been to Memphis a number of times, Bill. It's a great, great city. So, but it is known for having some crime.
Yeah, very good. Well, then the National Guard, they'll get in there. They'll get the job done. And who's up next? Thank you, Hank.
Okay, Bill, here's one from Megan in Austin, Texas.
Bring it on, Megan. What do you got?
She says, why doesn't the president just take over every single American city like he wants to? He said he'd be a dictator on day one, and he's living up to his promise.
He never said he'd be a dictator. He said he would be an effective commander-in-chief, and he's living up to what he said. He's being very effective. Crime is rampant nationwide in a lot of our big cities, and the president, he's getting down to business and taking care of business. Listen, unchecked crime, it's been festering in this country for far too long. Not everywhere, but in a number of places. It's actually a small minority of people who are making life intolerable and downright dangerous for a majority of our population. If cities and states, for example, LA, Chicago as well, if they can't or refuse to do their jobs, the federal government, in other words, President Trump, is obligated to be the grown-up in the room and TCB. Davey, what is TCB?
Does that mean take care of business, Bill?
Take care of business. Come on, man. You got to hunker down and get the job done. The mayors can't do it. The governors can't do it. The president will do it. And we'll switch things up here just a bit and take a look now at what's happening on Capitol Hill. It's a big deal on Capitol Hill, where Democrats are now threatening to shut down the entire federal government if they don't get their way when it comes to health care. I'm going to take my toys and go home. In case you're not aware, right now, Republicans in Congress are contemplating a stopgap spending measure to avoid a complete government shutdown. They're trying to help, man. It's set to take place at the end of this month, unless that measure passes. However, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer now saying that unless the GOP reverses course when it comes to health care and puts it in writing as part of the deal, both he and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, they are totally willing to encourage their party members to vote against the plan and take their chances with a shutdown instead. Mr. Schumer and company, you're playing a hand of poker with the country. I don't like it, and you better fold pretty quick. Schumer says that things have completely changed since the last time a similar measure came up for a vote earlier this year. That since then, Republicans have significantly trimmed a number of federal programs, such as Medicaid, as part of their massive tax cuts and spending package, and that Democrats are now more unified than ever when it comes to their stance on federal support for health care. Are they supporting federal support for health care or a government shutdown? You got to weigh those two things and think it out. You know Chuck Schumer. I know Chuck Schumer. I know what he's doing. He goes on to say that even if the government forced to close down because of their efforts, it won't make any difference in the grand scheme of things because President Trump will still be lawless, in his words. And with him in charge, things are bound to get worse either way. That Chuck Schumer, he's a real positive thinking guy. And right now, tensions between Republicans and Democrats skyrocketing in the Senate, where the GOP is in the process of unilaterally changing some rules which are related to the confirmation of presidential nominees, and Democrats up in arms over the Trump administration's pullback of nearly $5 billion in previously approved foreign aid. Meanwhile, Republicans say that Democrats are to blame if the government doesn't stay open, with President Trump urging the GOP to stop negotiating with the Democrats, stick together, pass a resolution to keep funding the government on their own. Final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. If you're driving around town at the end of this month and you see one of those big, giant closed signs hanging in that big, giant storefront of America, please point the blame squarely on that guy. Good time, Chuck Schumer. It's his fault. The esteemed gentleman from New York, more than 25 years into his gig, and nice work if you can get it, apparently he's up in arms about health care provisions. And being the fine leader he is, check out his strategy. Coming out, punching and screaming and yelling, and he'll ask questions later. Come on, Chuck. Making threats and demands and calling President Trump lawless and claiming that Democratic demands must be met. It's not an overly effective, grown-up way of doing the country's business. Try representing your entire constituency as opposed to your own personal agenda. And here's the deal. Republicans clearly want to keep the government opening, functioning, and serving each and every U.S. citizen. But those on the left seem preoccupied with chaos, dysfunction, and a U.S. government that can apparently no longer serve its population effectively. Therefore, negotiate in good faith with Republican leadership. Find common ground, stop with the threats, and do the job you're being overpaid to do. Your thoughts and comments. I know how much money he makes. Thoughts and comments, highly encouraged. We're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Davey, to the email bag, what are folks saying? It's a tough topic.
Yeah, nobody likes this kind of a conversation.
Yeah.
Lloyd in Columbus, Ohio.
Hiya, Lloyd. State your business, sir.
He says our nation's Congress is supposed to work together for the betterment of the entire country, not trample over each other on their way to imposing radically different policies.
Yeah. Listen, we've dealt with these government shutdowns in the past. They're never pleasant, but by and large, they generally don't last long. Everybody suffers, though, and Chuck Schumer is his party's leader. The guy makes close to $200,000 a year, JV. Fact check me if you want. Check it out. It's on the internet. Also has some pretty nifty perks you can read about as well. So what you got to do when you have one of them fancy jobs, you got to work hard. You got to find some common ground. Strike a deal. Keep the country moving. Otherwise, you're not doing your job. Now, some additional headlines we're keeping a very close watch on in the News Roundup newsroom. China sailing their massive new aircraft carrier through the Taiwan Strait in a highly provocative move that sends an undeniable warning to both the U.S. and any other country which supports the self-governing island. Beijing downplaying the maneuver, saying the vessel is simply on a training mission. No, they're not. They're on a threatening mission. I get it. The whole world gets it. NATO allies in Europe bulking up the defenses on their eastern flank following Russia's recent drone incursion into Poland's airspace and the new operation dubbed Eastern Sentry. They're adding fighter jets from France and Denmark to what the alliance's supreme commander is calling an entirely new defense design. We said it yesterday. Desperate times, desperate measures. You got to be careful. And the U.S. Energy Secretary, this is amazing, revealing that within 5 years, AI will actually unlock the secret to the harnessing of nuclear fusion. We use fission right now for our nuclear reactors, but nuclear fusion says the cutting-edge technology could actually begin powering up electric grids all over the planet in less than a decade from right now. This is amazing, and that could lead to a rapid reduction in greenhouse emissions. All right, switch things up here just a bit on a Friday and taking a quick peek at some developing stories which are making headlines today in the big world of big business. Apple delaying the release of their new iPhone collection in China. Dave, I thought they made them in China. Are they making them somewhere else?
I think they're making them in India now, Bill, or at least many of them are made there.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Delaying them in China, claiming that they're having a problem getting regulatory approval from the communist regime. In the meantime, the company's new models are now available for pre-order right here at home in the U.S. with delivery scheduled for 1 week from today. Davey C at the Apple Store a week from today. A towering resort complex rolling the dice and making a big bet on the city of Reno, which, if you don't know, is in the state of Nevada. Some people say Nevada, some people say Nevada. They're preparing to break ground on a massive $1 billion expansion project. Their new facility is set to include a state-of-the-art 10,000-seat arena as well as hundreds of new hotel rooms. Is that right, Davey? 10,000 seats?
That's correct, Bill. That's a nice-sized arena, perfect size for any sort of act that might show up there.
Perfect size for the News Roundup. 10,000 seats. Have plenty of seats for folks who want to come in and check out the program. And the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, reporting that our nation's federal budget deficit has grown to nearly $2 trillion for the first 11 months of the current fiscal year. And that's an increase of $92 billion from the same time last year. And now time for the lighter side of news, where we take an entertaining foray into a few fascinating stories guaranteed to leave you breathless or maybe speechless or somethingless. We kick things off today in western PA, Pennsylvania, and that's where a Baptist church pastor is making headlines after taking his emotional support animal with him for a trip to his local Walmart store. Well, the problem is the man's beloved support companion is a 5-foot-long alligator. You got to be kidding. The 60-year-old pastor says he's been bringing his 32-pound gator with him to Walmart for years, that he pushes her up and down the aisles in a shopping cart while she's wearing a dress. Who's wearing the dress? The gator? Not the guy. The gator's in the dress?
The gator's in the dress, Bill.
Gators don't wear dresses, and that he's never had an issue up until right now. This is kind of bizarre. Unfortunately, a spokesman for the retail giant now says the party's over, claiming that the safety of customers is their top priority, and that from now on, gators, crocs, and any other support reptiles no longer welcome in their stores. How about that? You know, each and every one of us should be afforded an emotional support creature. Dogs, cats, rabbits, birds, pigs, even goats. David, do you have an emotional support pet?
I do not, Bill, but I would like to get one.
You should get one. I myself have. I have an emotional support chia pet, and I refuse to go anywhere or do anything without my precious little companion. Now, so you know, Chia would be with me right now today in the studio, but I forgot to water it last week, and the little guy, is no longer with us. But I'll be buying a new one this weekend, and maybe I'll bring it to work. Now, look, at one point, you got to draw the line. There's no place in the world for an emotional support alligator. Gators live in swamps. They have a jaw full of razor-sharp teeth. And unlike my chia, they don't belong in Walmart, on airplanes, in the bank, or the grocery store. Leave your gator at home. Davey, I don't dig gators. And let's sail on now to the next story. And what do you have for us?
Okay, Bill, here's a story from your neck of the woods about a very enterprising artist with some very unique ideas.
Okay, we'll check it out. We'll turn to another visionary. He's taking his love for a certain fungus. There's a fungus among us, and his hatred of plastics to a whole nother level. An L.A. artist has just paddled from Southern California's Catalina Island all the way to the port of San Pedro here in L.A. on a kayak made entirely out of mushrooms. You got to be kidding. He says he took the 26-mile voyage on his homemade vessel to prove to the world that there is an alternative material which can be used instead of plastic to build a number of common items used in the water, including buoys and surfboards. He better hope shark don't like mushrooms. The brave paddler says it took him about a year to prepare for his journey by developing prototypes, growing the fungus inside a fiberglass mold, and then drying his mushroom kayak for months using a number of fans and a couple of hair dryers. Both he and his fellow fungus aficionados. Davey, are you a fungus aficionado? I'm just kind of curious.
I don't know that I would classify myself as that, Bill.
Me either, but his fungus aficionados say so far they're kind of happy with the results, that they hope his voyage inspires other youngsters to follow in his footsteps, and there's still a long way to go until we see a floating colony of mushroom houses. You know, Davey, mushrooms are one of the greatest inventions of all time. They're great on pizza. Cream of mushroom soup on a cold, rainy day is unbeatable. And they taste pretty good in a meatloaf. Sautéed, stuffed, baked, boiled, toasted, or pan-seared, mushrooms are the real deal. Mushrooms, however, should not be used in fruit smoothies, cherry pies, or in a piping hot bowl of oatmeal. As a general rule, avoid putting mushrooms in a Diet Coke, a glass of ice-cold milk, or in a pitcher of lemonade. Can I get an amen, Davey?
Amen, Bill. I can't believe you're not going to put it in your lemonade.
I would not put mushrooms in I'd think about it, but I wouldn't do it. Most important when building a seafaring vessel used for transport from an island to the mainland. As a general rule, don't use mushrooms to build out your ocean-faring, underpowered pretend cruise ship. It's just bad business. Now then, it is Friday. We're almost done, but we'll sweeten up the pot with just one more story. And producer Davey, where do we go from here?
Well, Bill, I guess we got to close out the week with, with a sweet story for everyone, Bill.
Well, I got a sweet tooth. I'm all for that. Finally today, apparently a sweet story which proves that while M&Ms may melt in your mouth, not in your hands, stolen cash, it always leaves a trail. A former executive for a subsidiary of the Mars Company now pleading guilty to fraud and tax crimes in connection with his theft of $28 million from the legendary candy maker. According to the feds, the guilty exec was once a respected member of the company's Mars Wrigley Group, and he used his prime position as a sugar expert to funnel millions of dollars in stolen cash to his personal account, which somehow mimicked an actual Mars Company chocolate company account. Virginia-based Mars, known for making a number of popular sweets, including M&M's, Snickers, Skittles, and even Double Mint Gum. Double your pleasure with Double Mint Gum. Even though the guilty 58-year-old has agreed to return every cent he stole to Mars and fork over another $10 million to the IRS in back taxes, he'll likely still earn a comfortable stint in the joint when he's sentenced for his sweet crimes next December. You know, if I knew there was that much money, Davey, in the candy business, I would have taken a part-time job making candy bars. I'll tell you, greed is a funny thing. Now, here's a guy who was already making a fine salary as an executive, a corporate confectioner. But apparently his salary, it wasn't enough. Now accused of sweetening up his bi-weekly paycheck with some extra funds to the tune of $28 million in extra cash. Now, producer Davey, I have good news and I got bad news. Which do you want first? And please say the good news.
Okay, Bill, how about let's start with the good news?
I'm surprised you said the good news, but okay, that's what you called for. Hey, good news is the jig is up. The guy's been caught. He's out on bail, but he's in a boatload of trouble. And this is where, Davey, you deftly ask for the bad news.
What's the bad news, Bill?
Glad you asked. The bad news is, as opposed to the bad news bears, the bad news is that the candy company got hit kind of hard. And to bounce back and recoup their losses, Well, they may have to raise the price of M&Ms and Mars bars, $112 a piece. But it'll only be a short rise in price. Now, maybe you get a discount if you buy a six-pack of candy bars. And that is a quick look at the lighter side of news. And sweeten the pot with your thoughts or your comments. We're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Davey, to the email bag, you're in charge. What are folks saying?
Okay, here's one from Sandy in Brockton, Massachusetts, Bill.
Very good. Sandy, what's on your mind?
Sandy says, I am a rather nervous individual, and I have an emotional support ferret. Do you think they'll let me bring it into Target?
Oh, I wonder if you have a leash for a ferret. Yeah, absolutely. Ferrets and hamsters and guinea pigs. I think pretty much anything is fair game for an emotional support creature, an emotional support pet. But I think we can all agree nobody wants to see an emotional support alligator in Walmart or anywhere else. I don't think ferrets have much of a bite. Alligators, on the other hand, they've got those big giant jaws and far too many sharp teeth. Appreciate you checking in. And Davey, who's up next?
Okay, here's one from Phil in Cheyenne, Wyoming.
Bring it on, Phil.
That guy who made a boat out of mushrooms was literally riding on mushrooms. He belongs in L.A. with the rest of the nut jobs out there, and you can have him.
Yeah, you can make a boat out of a lot of different things. Mushrooms are the last thing you want to make a boat out of. We're almost out of time, Davey, but what the heck? It's Friday. The weekend is upon us. One more, and we'll wrap it up.
Okay, Bill, here's one from Cassie in Jacksonville, Florida.
What you got for us, Cassie?
Cassie says, I've noticed that Snickers and M&Ms have been going downhill, and now I know why. That con artist swiped all the sugar.
Yeah, $28 million out of a candy company. How can you imagine that people can think that bizarrely, that they can get away with a crime to the tune of $28 million? And why would you steal from a candy company? Candy is Americana, man. M&Ms and Skittles, Mars bars, Doublemint gum. All you're going to end up doing is raising the price on all those sweet treats for the rest of us. Lock that guy up. Make sure he pays his debt back to society. Willy Wonka would not be pleased right now. And speaking of right now it is time for us to call it a wrap on the Aloha Friday edition of the Big News Roundup. But before we go, and as we do each and every day here on the program, we share with you a very notable quote. Man, these impactful words come to us today from a guy called Jerry Ford, who once said, history and experience tell us that moral progress comes not in comfortable and complacent times, but out of trial and confusion. Ford was our nation's 38th president, serving from 74 to 1977, became our nation's commander-in-chief following the untimely resignation of Richard Milhous Nixon. And now it is time for us to bust on out of here for the weekend. But before we call it a day, don't forget the News Roundup motto. Ask not what your podcast can do for you. Ask what you can do for your podcast. And all we need you to do is simply subscribe to the program so you never miss even a single episode. Hey, for now, it looks like our time, it's officially up. So have an awesome day today. Enjoy your weekend. Please stay safe. And let's all continue to watch out for one another. With that, my pal, Engineer Henry, I'll ask you to please dim the lights. Let's gently fade to black. And we'll see you right back here on Monday afternoon.